dinner with Kelly, who is on Grey's.
Okay.
She plays Maggie, I guess, I don't know, on Grey's, and then with Asia, who's on Murder, who's a black girl on Murder. So it's funny, it's like the TGIT.
Shonda peeps. You guys gotta take a picture.
But Kelly and I went to college together, so
Okay.
and then they became friends. But I was like, oh, it's just me like a Shondaland
Right.
day.
It's awesome that you guys all went to school together. It's funny how you
It is
ended
weird.
up in the same.
Yeah, I know. It's very strange. And I didn't know that she was on the show until, like, she showed up on Scandal. Like, I was watching television because I wasn't on that episode.
Yeah.
So I was watching it, and I was like, is that Kelly? Kelly's on the show? How did she go on the show?
I know her. Was she also a film studies
She was
major?
no, she was a theater person. So
Okay.
I like choreographed theater.
Oh, cool.
So I was danced, and so I knew her from, we had a bunch of mutual friends, and so I knew her. And then, yeah, and then I guess she came out here and got a job, and then she was on Scandal. Then in my episode, we had to kill her off. I felt bad. I was like, sorry, you're dying. It's like, it's not me. It's just the way.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, she did well on the show enough where she got the Grey's thing. So.
That's awesome.
So it's like, the best kill off ever.
It worked out.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I know you guys, Ashanti was telling me that you guys did breakdancing together.
Oh, why did I take that out of my mind? We did.
I love it.
We did. She was much better. I was not good.
That's so fun.
Yeah, it's so funny. I literally forgot that.
Blocked it out of your memory.
Do you know?
Ready?
I forgot about the breakdancing. She was like, I was like, oh my
It's
God,
like my
that did
favorite
happen.
fact about you guys.
I forgot about that orchestra.
So
I
awesome.
told her you were better than I was. Oh no. Yes. Oh my
wanna
God.
see the
That was
skills
the last
later.
time that I did
want to
that.
see the skills. You're right here. Take a seat. Get
Okay.
comfy.
Oh, my water.
And that's gonna be
Can I
your
reach
right
this? I
side.
can't reach that. I'll put it here.
Back, yeah. And then whatever's comfortable for your mic, you can move it closer to yourself.
Oh, okay.
That way.
I know nothing about technical stuff.
Techno-
Do I adjust it down like this?
That's a good question. I'm also technologically challenged.
I'm just going by what I see in the movies.
5 minutes. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha. I think I heard you.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Oh, you got it. Okay. How did
Righty
you do
tighty.
it?
Okay. Righty tighty, lefty loosey.
Lefty loosey. That's fine. Just giving us the 5 minute. You ready to rumble?
Yes. I found a place to put my water. Here.
Oh, you found a pouch? Oh, your purse. Come closer to us. We won't bite, promise. Okay, welcome everyone. For those I don't know, I'm Drew Dorsey. I'm going to be your host for the evening. And Roar Studios and myself would like to welcome you to our second Roar Talks event. Throughout the semester, we will be having 3 more Roar Talks events where we'll be bringing in industry professionals in the entertainment and news industry to expose you guys to possible future career fields. And today, we're joined by Raamla Mohamed.
Hello.
Raamla is the executive story editor on a little-known show you may have heard of called Scandal. She's also written for the show. She's worked on Grey's, Off the Map, and now she's here with us. So, without further ado, let's jump right in.
Okay. First of all, thank you guys all for being here. I know it's Sunday, so I appreciate it.
So, Raamla, can you tell us what it means to be an executive story editor?
Okay, so how it works is there, at least on our show, there are about like 11 or 12 writers, and there are different kind of levels that the WGA, the Writers Guild Association, assigns based on how many episodes you've been on a show, and you kind of move up the ranks, you know, every season. if the show decides to promote you. So the first level is staff writer, and that's kind of the lowest level, and then you move up to story editor and executive story editor, and then you go to co-producer, producer, supervising producer, and then co-executive producer. And a lot of the producers that you see, when you watch TV and it says supervising producer, producer, in the credits, those are actually writers, at least probably 80% of them. So in TV, the writer is kind of king or queen, and the writers produce their episodes. They, not only are in charge of the material, but also hiring directors. So it really is a writer's medium, especially compared to features, which is more of a director's medium. So being an executive story editor means I'm kind of like a lower to mid-level writer, and it's based on, it kind of tells you what your pay scale is going to be, what your responsibilities are going to be. If you are a co-executive producer, you're going to have more responsibilities as far as like maybe running the writer's room or talking to actors. So that's kind of what the levels are based on.
Okay. And you used to be a writer for Scandal.
Yeah, I'm still a writer. It's just that it's just that executive story editor is just kind of like the title that explains what, as far as compared to the other writers, where I am kind of level wise and pay wise.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about what the writer's room is like working on a show like Scandal?
Sure. So if you could imagine, it's a room that is probably a third of this size, and there are couches kind of lined along, and you have couches, yeah. Yeah, so we sit on, and actually everyone, some people are really serious about their space on the couch or the chair. And so there's a bunch of whiteboards in the room, and we have kind of season-long ideas, and then we have episode ideas individually. And so, things get erased on the board depending on if we change our minds. There's a writer's assistant in the room, which is a great entry-level job for anyone who's interested in writing and television. The writer's assistant takes the notes down as we all talk about story. So you learn, you get to kind of be literally like a fly on the wall, listening to how the writers work. So on Scandal, we come in the morning. There's a lot of talk about TV, like TV shows in the morning, which is fun. We talk about Empire, or some people watch The Affair, or whatever, just kind of chit chat. And then we start talking about stories. Depending on where we left off the day before, we might be like, okay, we need to now talk about Olivia's story today, or we need to talk about Melly and Cyrus today. And then we kind of take a break, eat lunch together, and then continue through the afternoon. So it's really, it sounds crazy, but it's a very laid back kind of environment. Of course, it gets a little crazy sometimes when we start shooting and scripts are due and changes need to be made. So sometimes we have to stay late and do that. But for the most part, this is a show. It's season 5. We have a lot of the same writers. We've added a couple, but so the dynamics are pretty comfortable. But it's just fun. It's fun to go somewhere and get paid to have your ideas shared and see them on TV.
Now, when a new writer comes on, how does that happen? Do they sell their soul?
I'm trying to think the new. As a writer, you'll get an agent, or you'll, especially if you are already on a show, or if you do a Disney program or a Warner Brothers program, they'll set you up with an agent or a manager. And so agents and managers are important because they're the ones who kind of help you, connect you with people, help you get the next job. So probably someone's agent, was pushing them to get on that show or a couple of shows. The producers might meet with a few people throughout the year and then decide, oh, okay, well, we need a new writer, or we've had some other people go off and do their own shows throughout the years. So that's kind of for the most part, it's through agents or managers, especially on a show like Scandal. Other shows, people hire their friends, that they've worked with before. It could be a mix of that, or it could be also, like I said, people reading material through agents and managers. So it's really important that, especially as a lower level writer, that your material, your pilot, your spec is like on point and really good.
Now, some people who are screenwriting majors may know this, but can you walk through the formula for each episode? Because I know it's different if it's like a 30-minute series versus an hour-long series. Like, is there a formula you guys follow in regard to, like, at this point, you have to like have a problem and they have to resolve it, and then at the, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. Our show is so serialized, you know, which means, you know, that it's based on what happens the week before. So, the first formula we have is just writing down what happened the week before. That's like our first thing we do. So we're like, okay, let's just make sure that, you know, you want to kind of make sure you're addressing character problems or stories that are happening, you know, throughout from the previous episode. So I guess that's kind of how we start. Also, since we sometimes have an idea of like different events, I'll say, that we want to happen throughout the season, we'll look at kind of our overall season board and say, okay, do we want this to happen in this episode, or should we push it off to another episode? Do we want to make this episode? Sometimes it might be that the show creator, Scandal Raamla, she might come in and say, I, you know, want this to be a special episode about this or whatever. So, you know, we kind of have to, you know, follow that, or we decide, you know, okay, no, actually this episode is going to be Olivia's going to work a case. So then we start talking about what case can she have and how can it relate to like what she's going through emotionally. Because it's important for us to care that we understand like what our kind of scandal of the week or whatever, how it's playing on, you know, our characters, if at all. So that kind of, it just depends on what type of episode we're doing. For instance, if like another, that's going to be their formula, and then it's going to be like, okay, Act 2, you know, you find the bad guy. Act 3, take him to court. You know, there's certain, what we call act outs, which is that moment right before the commercial break, you know, like that makes you go, what's going to happen? So we try to make sure we have those because we want to keep the story going. So we figure out what that is. It might be, you know, Olivia walks in and her dad is there, you know, and it's like act out. And so then we'll follow up the next act and address that. So, so we try to think of like, you know, how we want the story to progress, and, you know, the kind of big moments that we want the audience to feel at the end of, so they come back after the commercials.
We come back. Now, is there already a series finale? Does Shonda know how it's going to, or do you guys kind of develop it as it's going? I think she might know. I don't know, but I think she might know. But you know, that could change. You know, I know. I think for Grey's, she had an idea of how the show would end, but then the show went longer than, you know, that. So you know, it kind of depends, I guess. Yeah, I personally don't know. I'm just kind of living episode to episode, season to season. Do you guys in the writer's room ever have days where you're having writer's block and you're panicked and you're like, what are we going to write next to keep people watching?
Yes, I'd say I wouldn't say it lasts for days. I will say that it may be like a few hours. One thing I've learned is that, you know, when I used to write like in college or in grad school, it would take me so long to write something. Like I'd just be like, there's this video on the internet, just gonna watch this for a little bit. Oh, now I'm gonna go, you know, go to the movies, I'll get inspired. You know, it's just procrastinating all the time. So it took me forever to do anything. But then what happens is that when it becomes your livelihood, it's amazing how fast the ideas generate. So I think that, and then also, you know, TV, especially network television, you know, moves fast. It's not like cable where, you know, you only have 10 or 13 episodes and, you know, you get a lot of time to kind of think about, you know, like the story and all this stuff. We really don't have that much time, and, you know, there are pros and cons to that. But one of the pros is that you do, with the group of people, you do start to think faster and bounce off each other in a way that, makes things work. But yeah, like there sometimes is, we'll start a story and try to go through it, spend a few hours going through it and realize, okay, this isn't, this isn't it. So then people start just, thinking of random ideas just to see if something's gonna spark, which I think is always great. Like if you're working on a pilot or a script or a feature and you feel yourself like stuck, like try to just think of new ideas, like put that aside and think of new ideas, and I promise you, like something will happen where you'll shift back to that and you'll be able to look at it with fresh eyes, which sometimes is very helpful, to get the mind, because sometimes you're thinking so hard, and that you're not making any progress.
Now, do you prefer to write individually by yourself, or how is it like having to collaborate with other people?
I like collaborating with other people. I enjoy the fact that it's not just me who has to, come up with all the ideas. But as far as when we write the scenes, we write the episodes, you are writing by yourself. There's, you may have the outline and you have, how the story's going to go, but we're not like actual writing together. So it's kind of like a nice combination, because you still get to, have that individual focused writing time, but you have the influence of other people's ideas, and you don't feel like you're just out there swimming alone.
So then once you guys write individually, everyone kind of, are like specs? Is that what you guys are doing? And then
no, it's like episode to episode.
Okay.
And sometimes you'll write a lot of the episodes. Sometimes you'll write chunks of different parts of it. Again, where everyone's kind of working together, and sometimes things are so fast that everyone has to kind of chip in and help finish the episode. So.
Can you share a fun story in the writer's room?
A fun story. What kind of story? Let's see.
Was there a conflict ever when someone's like, "No, I want Olivia to do this. I want Fitz to do that." We have a few conflicts. Like there's some people who are like more Team Fitz, and there's more people some Team Jake. And so there's some battles about that. I'm trying to think of a specific story. I can't think of one. It's like I think my mind like erases things, so that I can be free of thinking. Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I know that we struggled. At the end of I remember at the end of season 3. Olivia and Jake go off to the island, right? And there was a discussion between the writers of like, does she get off the plane and like decide not to go at the last minute, or does she actually get on the plane and like leave? So that was like, there were a lot of teams of like, some people are like, no, like Fitz calls her and she gets off the plane, and decides to come back. But then other people are like, no, she just goes. She goes to the island, and then we don't know what's going to happen. So ultimately, I was Team Jake. So I was kind of like, let's go on the island. Her heart is breaking. But I will say though, it flows. I was Team Jake for a while. Like I was like, oh, Jake, like just, and then kind of halfway through last season, there was an episode where Olivia put her ring back on, and Fitz saw her across the way, and I watched and I was like, Olivia and Fitz, oh, and then I switched, and then I was back to Team Fitz. But yeah, I'll say I'm like a genuine fan of the show, so I think when something happens, like I cannot, like if someone pitches something or something that just seems weird as a fan or something, like I'm not good at hiding my face. So sometimes like they'll look at me like, are you okay? And I'm just like in a corner like,
So it is good. I mean, I think it's good to like the show that you have to write for. But yeah, so it is important to me that the characters stay true to themselves. And if not, sometimes my reaction is, I have to decide, is my reaction because it's like that's just crazy, or is my reaction I'm having like a fan reaction of because you don't want just happiness. There's no drama. There's no conflict. You want you kind of want bad things to happen so that you can see how the characters are going to get through it. So you can't be afraid to, let them suffer a little bit.
Do you have a favorite episode that you've worked on?
That I've worked on? I have a favorite episode. It was not my episode, but
it works too.
What did you say?
That works too.
Okay. My favorite episode still, I will say the lawn chair, the one we did an episode about kind of like a Ferguson episode, which which I thought was such a wonderful episode and is very like special to me. But I will say, like, as a fan, my favorite episode is there was an episode where Fitz runs out the clock as like season 2 and like sits with Olivia and he runs out the clock and he's like, "Watch me earn you," and they just play a whole song and they just sit there and the clock runs and it's like the best thing I've ever seen. And the whole episode, like I just liked the whole episode. I thought it was great and romantic and like just such a, and then at the end, Melly, says that he's been having this affair. So it's juicy and Cyrus is running through the tunnels and everyone's kind of at their best in that episode. So I think it's like the end of season 2. That's like my favorite episode. So.
Going back to the Ferguson episode, when do you guys ever have pressure when events like that are just events that are sensitive to people come about? Do you to incorporate that into the show? Is it ever like maybe we shouldn't do that? Maybe it's too soon?
No, I don't think that we felt pressure. I know that Shonda wanted to do it fairly immediately. After seeing what happened, she just was, as most people were, like so disturbed by what happened and thinking that story needed to be told. I think how it was going to be told was something that took some time. Were we going to tell the version where the cop gets away with it, which seems to be the version that happens in real life? Or do we tell the wish fulfillment version where like Olivia as the superhero saves the day? So that was a much debated kind of way, like how do we tell the story? What's going to be more interesting? As far as pressure, it's like, yeah, what is responsible? What do people want to see? Do they want to see, the tragedy that they see every day on the news, or do they want to see another type of reality and have a look at things a little differently?
Now, how closely do you guys work with Shonda? Is she in the writer's room, or do you guys send her?
So she's in the writer's room. We do have a showrunner who runs the writer's room every day, Mark Wilding, and but however, like we do table reads. She makes notes on the script. She hears the stories before we go to. So pretty much every step before we go to the next step, she's involved in. From just the ideas of the stories to the outline to the script, and then after we read it with the actors, she'll have more notes. She's involved with Scandal and Grey's, and then Pete Nowak he actually created How to Get Away with Murder, so that's more his show.
And what's it like working with Shonda?
It's great. I mean, I started on Grey's Anatomy as a writer's PA. So that was about 6.5 years ago. And so I've been, working for Shonda ever since. Even when Grey's was over and Off the Map started, then, I was allowed to like go to that show. I've just been very fortunate because she's always had shows. It's like not like working for someone who may have one show and then 3 or 4 years pass and then have another show. And she's very loyal to people, and also there are a lot of assistants who have, come up through the ranks and become writers. I mean, there are two of her former assistants or writers in the room, so she believes in promoting people from within, which is great, because then you don't feel like, oh, well, that lunch and coffee and all these errands I've been doing have been for naught. So it's great. I mean, so it feels like people say it's like the Shondaland family. It does feel like a family. It's also just, to be honest, as a black female, it's nice to have a black female boss. There's certain things I don't have to worry about that, I've heard happen in other writers' rooms that lack diversity. So all of those things are great. But it's been nice to see her, have a whole night of TV, and she's so brilliant. Even as an assistant, we would hear the notes, and she's able to pinpoint story issues in a way like that. You're like, that seemed obvious, but no one thought of that. And she's like, yep, nope, this, boop, move this here, do this here. And she does the same thing. She's very involved in editing the show. So I will say it's just a privilege to kind of be able to witness, someone who works on a level that you can't even imagine. So
definitely. Now, for you guys who don't know, Raamla was accepted into the very prestigious ABC Disney writing program. And I'm curious, is that how you got the writer's position initially?
Yeah, so let's see, I can walk through. It's a very strange, complicated process that happened, but I'll walk through. So I went to USC for grad school for TV writing and film. And for about a year after that, I was kind of like what they call partially employed. Kind of just working odd jobs. And then I had a friend who was an intern at private practice and said, there's an opening for a PA position at Gray's, and send me a resume like right now, it's very fast. And so I applied for that, I got that job, and worked there for a little less than a year when Off the Map was being developed by Jenna Bands, who was a writer on Gray's, and so she asked me to be her assistant. And it was great. I mean, when you assist, a creator on a pilot, you get to read a lot of scripts because you're reading for staffing. So you get to see what's out there, what type of writing is out there. You learn a lot about your own writing. You be like, oh, I like the way this person wrote this or whatever. And so I read a lot of scripts, and then we did staffing, and then luckily the pilot became a show. So then when it became a show, Jenna said, do you want to be the writer's assistant, researcher? So I said, I'll be the researcher, because that meant that I could, find stories that the writers might like. So then I got to pitch in the room and say, okay, I read this article about this, and maybe that could be a good story. And but then you're in the room, but you don't have the pressure of having to pitch as a writer, so it's a little more low key. But you learn a lot. Like I said, you get to observe what happens in the writer's room. But that show only lasted a season, and so then I'm like, oh, unemployed again. And at the time when Off the Map was finishing up, Shonda was doing the Scandal pilot, and so since I was a researcher on Off the Map, she asked me if I would fact check the Scandal pilot. So I said, okay. And she said that if Scandal got picked up, then I could be the researcher on Scandal. So the first season I was a researcher on Scandal. Now, hard to believe, but first season of Scandal, we only got 7 episodes, and we were going to premiere in April. So I was like, well, all right. Been fun, I guess this is just gonna be something we all did, and then it's gonna be over. So I applied to the Disney program, kind of like, all right, I don't know what's gonna happen after this, but apply to the Disney program and see what's gonna happen. So at that point, I applied for the Disney program, and then while I was in the Disney program, the show aired, and because we were done October, the show didn't air until April. and I was in the Disney program between that. And then the show aired, and it was doing okay, and they picked it up for not a full season 2, just 13 episodes, which again, working in TV, if you're not getting a full pickup, or if you're not, there's no guarantee, everyone's a little nervous. They're kind of like keeping their eyes open to see if they're, what else might be out there. So I came back as a Disney fellow for 13 episodes and got an episode, and then luckily the show just took off. People were tweeting about it, suddenly celebrities are talking about it, and we're getting promos, and people are like obsessed, and the cast has gone on different interviews, and it was very exciting. And then we got our back 9, and I've been on the show since. So yeah, I mean, a lot of it is kind of luck, people. It was just lucky that the network kept the show on and long enough so that it could build a fan base, and it did. So that was kind of the trajectory. But I could have, the show could have been canceled. I could have been on some other show, or I could have not gotten into the Disney program. There's just so many. I tell people you got to just be prepared for anything, and if something's going well, then enjoy that, but don't get too comfortable, because you never know what could happen.
Can you go into a little bit more about the program? Is how big it is, how long?
Sure. The Disney program is great because there's 8 people. I think there's 8. There might be 10 now, but it's 8 to 10 people, and it's like half comedy writers, half drama, and it's only TV. But it's great because they pretty much staff everyone on a show, whether it's a Disney show or ABC Family show or ABC Studio show. And what's great about that is that the show, it doesn't cost anything for the show to have you on their show, because ABC is paying for it. So you get a chance of being free on a show and proving yourself. Get kind of like an extra year to prove yourself and say, hey, I'm worth paying for. So the other thing is that they connect you with creative executives, mentors, so you get to meet studio people, and it's so important to network and have people know who you are, especially throughout your career, but also in the beginning, because you want someone to be thinking of a show and go, oh yeah, I met so and so at this mixer, and they have a good vibe, and then I read their pilot, and they're a good writer. You should consider this person, because it's you're always going to need all the help you can get. But yeah, there's the ABC Disney program, which they skewer toward kind of diverse writers, but then there's a Warner Brothers program that does TV. CBS has a diversity program, I believe. I guess HBO just started one. There's a lot of different types of programs for young writers who are trying to break in. And if you really work hard and write a good sample, then you definitely have a chance of getting in. So I encourage all of you to apply to once you're out of college to apply to these programs, because they're a great segue into having a good career. There's 3 of us who are in the Disney program on the show, and then there's one person who's in the Warner Brothers program. So it does pay off.
Actually, if just half of you could apply, so that way. Now, going back to grad school, Raamla went to USC, where she studied writing. Did you already know that you wanted to do grad school?
No, I went to Columbia with Ashante, and I did film studies in English when I was there, but it was more film theory and which was great, but it's not like it was a writing class, or writing studies. So I kind of worked in New York in theater, and kind of struggled a little bit. And then I realized I don't know anyone. I didn't know how to really write a script. I didn't know anyone who could help me do that. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna go to grad school because I'm pretty good at school. School is cool for me. And I'm from LA, so I was like, I'll just live at home, that's fine. And yeah, so I was like, you know, it's 2 years, it's a 2-year program, and at least I will like have the credentials like USC, you know, film, meet some people, network, and that'll give me a little bit of an edge. And it did, I mean, it really, I said I got my Grey's Anatomy job from someone I went to school with. So when I, you know, pay my student loans, at least I feel good about about that. But it's not for everyone. You know, I think that there are ways to, you know, get in assisting. Like if you know someone, if you can get on a set, if you can PA. You know, if you already are in a film program and someone is working on something, then you can definitely work, you know, your way up if you already have those connections. But again, I didn't have the connections, and so that was kind of why I decided to go to grad school.
Yeah, because I was going to say, a lot of people say when you want to get into the entertainment industry that the degree is not that heavily weighted. It's more so like skills and who you know.
Right.
So like a lot of times people are like, do I need to go to grad school? So.
Right. Yeah. I mean. Yeah, it is. It definitely is that. But again, from going to grad school, I was able to meet, you know, a bunch of people and even just fellow classmates who are working on various shows. I have a classmate who's on Power, a classmate who's on NCIS, another one who's on Murder. You know, you're suddenly like, oh, these people I went to school with, you know, are working writers too. So in that sense, I think it helped me at least.
Yeah. Now, after you graduated Columbia, you said you worked in theater for a long time. What pegged that? Were you always interested in theater, or?
I wasn't always interested in theater. It's funny. I babysat for a theater actress. This is typical 20s behavior. So I babysat for this theater actress who was real nice and cool, and I told her I was working at Washington Mutual as a receptionist, but in the home loans office. So everyone would come in and be like, "Is this the bank?" And I'd be like, "No, this is the home loans office." And then someone else would come in and be like, "Is this the bank?" And I'd be like, "No, it's the home loans office." So I did that like 40 times a day, and I was like, I have to find a new job, and so I told the woman I would babysit for sometimes that I was looking for a job, and she was at a paint store in New York and overheard this guy talking about how he needed an assistant, and she went up to him, I can't even believe this is a real story, but it is, and said, "I know someone who'd be a great assistant for you." And he was like, "Okay." And then she gave him my number, and then suddenly I interviewed with him, and he was starting a new theater, and was looking for a full-time assistant, and he was great, and I worked for him for like almost 2 years. And the great thing is that it was a theater that had 3 spaces, and they always had shows coming in and out. So I had to watch all the shows. And suddenly I'm like, oh, I've seen like 40 plays, like I've seen all these plays, and I would meet the playwrights and hang out with the actors, and I loved like some of these plays were just so good, and it was really powerful to me, like how writing, like, you know, you could connect to it, especially theater is very, like you're right there, you know, it's very like intense. And so yeah, then I thought, like, I was like, oh, maybe, you know, it's like, I'd written like a couple shorts in college or whatever, but I was like, that's kind of when I started thinking like, oh, maybe I'll be a playwright or a screenwriter or something. And then it wasn't until kind of grad school that I got a little more interested in TV. I didn't even know, I was like, isn't there just like one person who writes TV? Like I didn't know how it worked, you know, I was like, oh, there's a whole group of you, and then you sit there all day and you talk about the story and they pay you? Like I just was like, I don't understand. Like, where's the trick? So that was kind of the theater, kind of segued into the, you know, screen and TV. And there actually are a lot of playwrights who end up, you know, working in TV because it's fairly similar, especially dialogue and different things. So.
Now, talking about how like you kind of didn't know that there were so many different positions, you touched on this earlier, but can you go more in detail on like the hierarchy in the writers' world, like how there's writers, there's script supervisor, and
right?
positions?
So there are, if you were to like, you know, look at all the employees on Scandal, you know, there are like hundreds of employees for the show. You have not just, like you have the writers, but also you have editors, and you have, you know, a whole set of people. You have, you know, key grips and, you know, busboy grips and, you know, headlighting people, script supervisors, assistant directors. And all of these people do pretty well in life. And, you know, the hours can vary depending on, you know, how intense your job is. But, you know, from props to wardrobe to, there's so many different ways to work in television. Now, as far as, you know, in the writer's room, again, the more like higher up you are, the more responsibilities you have as far as, you know, kind of running the room a little more, especially if like the showrunner's not there, or, you know, you're just gonna have more experience. If you think about it, like, you know, there are some people, you know, in here might be freshmen. If you're a freshman, you're new to college, you're figuring out like your time management, you know, you're just happy not to be living at home. There's so many exciting things, you know, you come in, it's like, you're like college, and then when you're a senior, you're like, okay, like, you're like, I'm ready, I know, I get it, you know, it's college, you know, you're still enjoying yourself, but there's more experience. You don't necessarily have to figure things out as much. So the lower level writers are like the excited freshmen, and sometimes we're like overeager, and, you know, especially when I was a staff writer, you're like, oh, like you're sitting there and you're silent and you're not talking and you're going, oh my God, I haven't talked in like an hour and they're gonna think I'm so stupid, oh my God, and then you say something and then no one likes it and then you're like, I am stupid, I'm never gonna talk again. Like you're just a crazy person. And then, you know, after a few years, you get a little more confident, and then time just happens, you know? Like, you know the drill, and, you know, the show's gone on as long as it can, and you're like, oh, okay, well, actually, no, we tried that before, that's not gonna work, this should move over here. You know, it becomes a little more second nature. You're not living in your head so much. You know, you've already got drunk and passed out on the floor somewhere for like freshman year, you know, you're like, okay, I'm not doing tequila, that's a bad idea. So you just like learn things, you know, just like, that's what I think about. I'm clearly telling everyone my college experience. But yeah, so it's just time and experience. And it can be frustrating because time is frustrating because you can't fix time. You know, you can't make it go faster. You just have to, you know, just kind of be patient and learn from it, and learn from the people around you, because, you know, there are people in that room who've worked on different shows and been working for a while, and, you know, they'll pitch something and you're like, that was like in your head? Like you just thought of that? Like just now? Like it's just, you know, but it's because, you know, they've been doing this for a while, and you have to trust that at some point that'll be you, that you've been doing this for a while.
What's the age range?
What's the age range? Oh, so I'm glad that you asked that question. This is a myth that, I don't know if it exists more in comedy rooms. I think it might exist more in comedy rooms. So I'm okay telling my age. So I'm 34, and I am the second youngest writer in the room. For some reason, especially when I started as a PA, I was like, you know, God, I was like 27 or maybe something, and I thought, I am the oldest PA in the history of PAs. Like, I thought everyone was gonna be like 21, like fresh out of college, and like, you know, and I thought that the writers were gonna be like, you know, early 30s, and I'm like, I started too late, it's too late for me. But that's not the case. It's, you know, you have a lot of people who worked on different shows and have had careers, but also, you know, people want people in the room who've lived lives, you know, who've done other things. So, you know, I wish that I had figured out exactly what I wanted to do a little earlier, but it's also like, if you don't know, it's completely fine. Like, take random jobs, go abroad, do something that you can only do in your 20s because you don't, you're not married or have kids, or do something, where you're stuck in a certain kind of situation. But if you can, there's a lot of downtime, in the writer's room. And my boss, the other day, he was talking about how he had like a 2-week job driving for FedEx, and just we're like cracking up because we cannot imagine him driving a FedEx truck. But it's just you have to be a person, you have to come with experiences, because that's what inspires the stories. So, before I started in TV, I worked at the LA Sparks, and I worked at the Gap, and I worked, I had random weird jobs all over. I lived in New York and came back, and I've worked for insane people, I've worked for nice people. So it gives you a little more color. And so, if you become a working full-time paid writer before you're 30 years old, you have succeeded a lot. So, even like when I became, people were like, when I'm on set, with some of the directors who have worked for a while, like they're like, you're a child. Like, I'm like, I'm so old. It's just, I'm aging before we know it. And they're just like, they're in their 50s and 60s, and they're like laughing that I think, 34 is old. So it's all relative, I guess.
That helps me to breathe a little bit. Those people want to be writers. Now, going back to when you were a PA, because I know like out of college, that's probably a lot where people are going to enter the industry.
Right.
So I know you guys like get coffee sometimes, but what do you do normally as a PA?
That's a lot of what you do. It's coffee, it's lunch, what else? I had to kind of organize the make sure, print out scripts, that was a big thing, collate scripts. Basically anything that they want you to do. When I worked on Grey's, those writers are so nice and they're pretty self-sufficient, but there's still a lot of them. So even if 3 of them had small favors, you're kind of running around. But again, it's those jobs are so hard to get that I tell people you can't, it's important that you keep a smile on, that even if it's a long day, that you have, get a chance to connect with, writers, that you can, and don't have like a timetable. Like I heard one girl who's a PA, she's like, I've been doing this for 3 months, I feel like a waitress. And I was like, 3 months? I was like, the person before you did it for 2 years. It's like, you can't have expectations. You just have to do every job, like the best that you can do it. I'll tell this quick story. When I was a PA, there was a writer who was very sweet, and I would bring him his coffee into the writer's room, and then I started noticing that every day for about a week, he would come back into the kitchen and do his sugar and whatever. And so I'm like, oh. So then next time I got his coffee, I brought all the stuff that he would get from the kitchen, and I just brought it, and I said, here you go. I noticed that you end up going back to the kitchen, and he was like, thank you. Like, I think I won him over for that. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, it was such an easy thing to do. I was just like, this seems ridiculous that I'm bringing this and then you're coming back, just logically. Right. And it's just little things. You can't judge the job, what it is. Even as a writer, there are times where I might not I might not agree with certain things, but it's not my show. Like, I'm there to give my opinion. I'm there to work as hard as I can. But at the end of the day, like, everyone has a boss. Everyone has things that they need to do. So, you can't judge certain situations. You can only do the job to the best of your ability and try to, be fair and creative and, speak up when you can.
Now, we're winding down on time, but I want to know, what advice do you have for aspiring writers?
Oh, let's see. I would say and I know people say this all the time, like, writers write, real writers write. And I used to find that kind of annoying because I'm like, I'm busy, I can't just write all the time. But it is true, like, I think about some of the early specs and features and stuff that I wrote that are like, just flat out terrible. But I had to write those. I had to learn from those. I had to get that out. And if you think about, I was talking about time and how you can't, necessarily control time, but what you can control is how much you do in that time. And, if you write something and you don't like it, don't think that you're the worst writer in the world. That idea, the way you executed it, whatever happened, just didn't click. Just move on. There'll be something else that clicks. I mean, think about, for instance, either your favorite, screenwriters or something, will write like the best movie ever, and then like their next movie, you'll be like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. Like, there's no kind of edict that says that once you're a great writer, you'll always be a great writer. Everything you write will be like amazing. It's not going to happen. So those people who win Oscars and then probably win Razzies another year, like if those people aren't consistent, don't hold yourself to that same standard that you always have to be consistent. But what you do have to do is keep writing and learn from what you write. If you write a spec of like Mad Men or something, and you realize, what, I don't even know why I wrote that. I don't even like Mad Men. Like, write a show you like. You write a spec of a show you like. Or if you write a pilot that's sci-fi, and then you realize, I don't even know why I wrote that. I don't like sci-fi. Then write something you like. Write something that connects to you, and that's personal to you, so that you enjoy it. And it will be better. It just is going to be better. If I were to write, like the Lord of the Rings TV show and turn it to my agent, he'd be like, this is terrible. Like, I can't write that. So just know what you can write. And the only way sometimes you can know what you write is just to keep writing different things and explore, like your voice, as they say. And it could be that you think you're comedy, you're actually drama, or it could be vice versa. So I'd say try to figure out, that and spend the time writing as much as you can.
You heard the woman. Can we give a round of applause for Ms. Raamla? Thank you, Raamla, so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you guys for coming on a Sunday.
Appreciate it. And if you guys would like to come to our next Roar Talks event, it will be on October 25th with Colleen Williams, who's an anchor for KNBC. So thank you all for coming, and hope to see you next time. You survived.
Okay.
You did.
I don't know what I was saying.
It was great. Very